balanced and humble, real person. And so I'm like, I know what they're saying is not true. I know what they're saying is not me. And I remember texting Jillian, and she was like, "What's going on over there?" And so she called, and I told her what was going on, and we talked. And, I kept my calm and center. But at that point, I knew that these two friendships was pretty much over. No hard feelings, but I can see that, we were growing in different directions. And truth be told, probably in November or December of 2019, God had showed me that me and these two other people were growing apart, and we were going on different paths. And not to say that their path wasn't a good path, but it just wasn't the path that God was taking me down. And so I needed to separate from them in order to continue the path that God was taking me on. And so I could, accept and embrace the situation, knowing what God had already dealt with me in my heart about. So, we come back, February comes. Now I'm in the National Guard. The unit that I was in at the time was a civil support team, weapons of mass destruction, basically a chemical, biological, nuclear, radiological expert unit. So this stuff was, COVID stuff was right down our lane. And so before it became public knowledge, we were asked to do some testing, test one person. The next day it was like, well, we need you to test three. And then by the end of that week, it had grew exponentially. And now we were placed on this mission. But the mission was not for public knowledge. And so we were dressed in our civilian clothes and carrying out this mission daily, unable to really talk about it and share, what we're doing, so as not to alert the public and give them, any reason to be worried, concerned, upset, etc. And so as we entered March, I thought to myself, wow, this is pretty bad. This is spreading quickly. The numbers are just unbelievable. And, we have a problem. And I looked around, and everyone was just kind of going about their business, nobody paying too much attention. Some people kind of hesitating and stopping, but most people didn't realize the scope of the issues that we were going to face. And so, April comes, and, as this thing blows up, the country or our state goes on lockdown, and, it starts to hit close to home where people, I know are getting sick, and my life is impacted. And it was just an unbelievable time. I had a situation where, I was in a crisis, and literally, I'm now managing one of our testing sites, and we're testing about 600 people a day, and I'm in charge of this, and the 50 something soldiers that are working under me. And all of a sudden my personal life just crumbles unexpectedly. And it happened over a weekend. And so, it happened on a Saturday. Sunday I woke up like, oh Lord, did this really happen to me? And just kind of breaking down in tears and crying, and then pushing myself to praise God in the midst of those tears, knowing that my Father knows what's best for me, and knowing that He's going to take care of me, and knowing that He sees the bigger picture that I don't see. Monday comes around, I get in my car, I drive to work, I pull up to the site, and all of a sudden the emotions rise up, and I'm about to have a breakdown, ugly cry. So I text my boss, and I'm like, sir, I was like, I know this is a real bad time, but I need someone to relieve me right now. I need a couple mental health days. And so my boss knows that I never tap out. I am always in. Once the mission is on, I'm in it, and I'm all in for the duration. And so he texts me back, and he says, 20 minutes. He was like, someone will be there in 20 minutes. He didn't ask any questions. And I was thankful, but because he trusted me, and because God was watching out for me. So I went home, and, I cried, I prayed, and went to sleep. And so that week I took two and a half days off, talked to the chaplain, and got right back in it. But every day that I went home to an empty house alone. I didn't have my daughter, who's 4 at the time, because we're separated. And now I'm working the site. I can't have her at home because I don't want to expose her. My son is with me. He's, 23. He's kind of stuck in doing his online college stuff. And I have nobody to talk to. I go to work, I have nobody to talk to. And the thing about my job is, even though I have all these soldiers, I'm the boss, I'm the captain. And so when the captain comes around, everyone's like, oh, what do you need, ma'am? Because they're like, we just want to take care of you so you can go back and leave us alone and don't bother us. And so I had this loneliness that I was experiencing as I'm going through this crisis. And my pastor's wife is reaching out to me, and, she's like, I feel so helpless because I can't be there with you, and I said, I'm good, it'll be fine. It's going to work out. And so what God said to me was, it's just me and you. He was like, you have to go through this with me by yourself. He was like, this is something that nobody can help you with but me. So talk to me. And I was like, true. I'm like, you're right, Lord. Every morning I got up, I went out on my deck. I had quiet time where I just cleared my mind. And then I prayed. I read my devotional, and I just listened, and I said, God, minister to me, speak to me, because I need you. And I just poured out everything that I was feeling about what I thought was supposed to happen with my life, what was going on in my personal situation, God, I thought you were moving. I thought you were in this. And, and I just pour it out and talk to him. And he wants us to talk to him. I mean, when we have a crisis, he wants us to run to him first because he has a solution. And a lot of times we run to people first because that's our natural instinct to want someone physical there. But God was like, nah, you need me, because it's deeper than that. And through that, God was able to minister to me. He was able to heal me. And I was still experiencing the crisis. It didn't go away, but at least I was able to manage it in a healthy way. 2 years ago, I had been in a crisis. I experienced a divorce. And boy, I had some maladaptive coping. And I knew it. And I chose to use those maladaptive coping methods, knowing that it was wrong. And, you have some friends, and if they're not godly friends, they're just going to watch you and encourage you to do those maladaptive things. And that's not what God wants. And so God made sure that this wasn't going to happen. He made sure that this was a time that he was going to draw me closer to him, because there was no other choice. I had to be. And so I'm thankful that through that, I was able to draw nigh to him, and he was able to draw nigh to me. And you know what he said to me? He said to me about this crisis, he says, from day one, did you seek me for guidance? And I was like, well, no, I made an assumption that this was your will for me. And I realized I had made an assumption. I hadn't sought him. I hadn't asked him. I just made an assumption. This is a good thing. I want this. I'm so happy this is happening. This must be God's will. And I was wrong. And God knew that it was all going to happen. It would all unfold this way. And what it taught me is that you always have to make a conscious effort to seek God. Always. I mean, and then I remember, talking to Jillian, and, this year is my year of 50. I turned 50 this year. And I had planned to go to Bali, Indonesia. And I was like, Jillian, I'm going to Bali. Come on with me. All you got to do is buy your plane ticket, And so we was like, let's go. So we planned this trip to Bali, all excited, looking forward to it. Guess where we're not going? Not this year, to Bali. And I was devastated. And I was like, God, I wanted to travel for my birthday. That was the thing I wanted to do most. And God was like, no, you're just going to be here. Thank you, Stephanie. He was like, no. He was like, I got work for you. You got to work on you. You can't run away from this. You can tell yourself you celebrating your birthday, but you just running out of this country, and travel is your Band-Aid. And I love to travel, always have. But he said, no, he's like, you're going to be here, and you're going to deal with this all the way through and get it all and work it all out. Because I'm going to work it all out of you, because this is a testimony. And I'm going to work it all out and bring you to a higher place in me. And so I'm so thankful that, I understand when, you know, we would make plans, and sometimes my mother and the saints, but they say, well, God willing. And I'd be like, oh, we're going to do this. They're like, God willing, we're going to do this. And so, I am so appreciating the wisdom and the words of my mother and the church mothers that raised us, because now it's like I understand so much better, all of that, all of that. And the one thing that, and there were many things that God taught me, but, he said, you have to heal, and healing takes time. And you don't like taking time. You want things done. You want to check it off your list and move on to the next thing. But that's not how this works. He was like, you have had a crisis, a heart hurt, and it's not business as usual. And even one time I went into work and I said to my boss, he was like, how are you doing? I was like, I'm good. And he said to me, that's today. He's like, it'll be different in a couple of days. And I was like, man, can't you be happy I'm good today? But there was a real reality that he was speaking, that God was using him to speak to me, to remind me that, yeah, you feel good today, but it's not over. You are not through this. The process is not done. And so I just want you guys to know that if you've been through a crisis, and that can be something minor, it can be something major, something in between. Only you know what a crisis is in your life, because what a crisis is to me might not be a crisis to you. Or it might take a whole lot for me to get into a crisis, but something less severe might be a crisis to you. But you have to process it, and you have to go through it. And I tell you, first, you have to put that hurt in front of you. By that, I mean, you have to acknowledge it. Don't pretend like it don't hurt that bad. Don't pretend like, oh, I'm good, I don't care. I didn't care anyway, because you do. And it hurts bad. And so you have to acknowledge that. You have to speak it out there, and you have to own it. You have to make sure that you get it off your chest. One of the things I did is, I started to, and I said, if I didn't know who I was, this would devastate me. It would devastate my self-esteem, my self-confidence, my self-image, who I thought I was, but I know who I am. Yet it did pick at it. It did pick at it. And I can't lie and say that it didn't. And so what I did is I wrote myself a letter. And I wrote myself a letter to remind myself of who I was, of the treasure I was, of the jewel that God had created, the gifts that he put in me, the wonderful, amazing human being that I am. So that I would remind myself on those days when I didn't feel any of that, oh no, this is who you are. And I signed it, Love, Victoria. And so from time to time, I look at that and I read that to myself out loud to remind myself of who I am and my qualities, so that I make sure that I am showing myself the self-care, the self-love, the forgiveness, the understanding, and all of that. And we have to forgive ourselves, because sometimes we have other people that we have to forgive, but you also need to make sure you look and say, do I need to forgive myself? And not that you've done anything wrong. For example, there were things that I blamed myself. And I said, there were some signs that things were going wrong. And I allowed them to be explained away. I allowed excuses. I allowed reason. I pushed my intuition to the side, and I was understanding, because I always struggled with people telling me I was inflexible and I was too rigid. And they would say, you're such a soldier. You're not a soldier in here. This isn't your army. We're your friends. We're your family. Don't be our boss. You're not our captain. And so I was always struggling with, am I being too flexible? Am I being inflexible? Never finding that balance. And so I blame myself, and I was like, oh, you're such an idiot, and I saw myself just beating myself down for not making different choices and different decisions. When in reality, that was the only decision I could make, is to stay the course. And so I had to forgive myself. And after that, I said, from this day forward, I am going to, number one, trust God, trust what His Spirit is telling me. And I'm going to trust my intuition. There are behaviors that I will not accept from anyone, and that I will live by. And that is my form of loving myself. That is my message, that I love myself. So I'm not going to allow you to talk to me a certain way. I'm not going to allow you to treat me a certain way. And I'm not going to allow you to, abuse my time, abuse my kindness, take me for granted, et cetera, whatever that is, because it's just not okay. And it's part of me saying to myself, Victoria, I love you, and you're better than that. And you don't deserve to be treated that way. And so as long as you allow people to treat you a certain way, they will, because you've given them permission. And so we have to stop giving people permission to walk over us, to take advantage of us, to take our kindness for weakness. And I'm not saying help people. There are people I help, and I help them because I want to help. But don't expect anything in return. Just do it for the act and for the gratification of helping. But when someone is actively taking advantage of you, then that's when you say no. And you have to learn when to say no. You don't have to say yes all the time. That's not God's will for you to say yes to everyone and burn yourself out and not be there for your family, not be there for your job, not be there for the purpose that He's called you to do. Everything is not a yes. So you have to learn to discern, God, what is it that you're calling me to do? What are the things that I say yes to? And what are the things that I say no to? And that's going to help you take care of yourself. And you have to be unapologetic about it. And my new mantra had been, I'm living unapologetically. And it wasn't that I'm living in a way that says I don't care about people, or that I was living in a selfish or mean or unkind way. But it meant that I'm living and I'm making clear my choices, my yeses and my nos, and I'm not going to apologize for it. Sometimes we say, oh, I'm so sorry, I can't do that. And maybe you are sorry, but sometimes we know good and well that we don't want to do something, and that we can't go to someone's house, or we can't go to this event, or we can't speak here, we can't go there, and we apologize. And we're so accustomed to doing that. You don't have to do that. You can just say, unfortunately, I can't do that. And you don't owe anyone an explanation. People are not in charge of you. God is. And so you need to take care of your family, absolutely. And you need to take care of what you need to take care of, your responsibilities at work. And then you need to seek God for the other things that He wants you to take care of. The other thing is, if you have people that have offended you, that have hurt you, and it's really affecting you, I suggest you think about writing a letter of release to them, and write exactly what's on your heart. And I would say the letter, when you first write it, because you're going to write a couple, I would advise, because the first one is just your raw feelings, your raw emotions, everything you feel, and then leave it, come back to it, reread it, take all of that emotion out of it. Don't be vengeful. Anything that's spiteful, take it out, because the purpose is to explain and to express to the person how their actions, how their words affected you. Not to bash them and to make them feel bad in that manner, but just to share, when you told me that I was good for nothing, that really hurt me at my core, because I thought that you knew me better than that. So you want to be very neutral, and you just want to be factual. And so when you've rewritten it and you just made it factual, and you took all of the venom and the poison and all of the spite and anger and whatever feelings you had out of it, read it. And it should sound pretty much neutral, but it should be moving, because the hurts are real. And then I would tell you, send it. But I would tell you, only send it if you feel that it's safe. Now, if you're in a situation where there's domestic violence, where there's physical abuse, don't send it. Use judgment and seek God. Pray. Writing and you send it. Number one, it allows you to get it. You've taken all the confrontational language out of it after you've edited it that second time, and you send it in release. And then you forgive. And I know Minister Jillian talked about forgiveness, and I'll reiterate, you have to practice forgiveness. It doesn't mean the next day after, an incident that you're able to forgive. You can't sometimes because the hurt and the pain is deep. But you have to pray and pray and pray. Every day I had a prayer of forgiveness that I said in the morning and in the evening, in the morning. And I didn't mean it at first. I made myself say this prayer of forgiveness. And then eventually I did mean it. And eventually I was moved. And eventually I actually loved the person again. And I was like, am I losing my mind? But no. And forgiveness, it is for you. Because, forgiveness, when you forgive someone, you let them go. You release them. When someone forgives you from a debt, they release you from that debt. You don't owe them anymore. But when you hold on to the bitterness and the anger, you're just clenching. And you got to get tired of clenching. That's exhausting when you're holding on. I mean, I think of it, we have to do pull-ups. So when you're holding on to that bar, you are wasting a lot of energy as opposed to if you just let go. If you let go. But we hold on so tight, clenching it. We don't want to let it go. We don't want to let it go. We don't want to let it go. And that clenching is just hurting all our muscles. We get an arthritis from it. And we just don't know why we're still so upset and bound up inside. Because you got to forgive. Bible tells us, forgive those that use you, that say all manner of evil against you, that are spiteful towards you. It says forgive. God forgives us every single time. And we've got to model that. And it is not easy. It is not easy, but it's something that we have to do. And you have to change your mindset. And someone earlier in the day had mentioned, they were talking about, oh man, it's going to come back to me because it had to do with changing the mindset. But you have to change the way you look at things. Oh, they talked about people and people failing. And so, even, in the Bible, it says, don't look to princes, don't look to people because they will fail you, but look to God. And I mentioned that in my comments that, sometimes we forget that people are human. The pastor's human. The evangelist is human. We're all human and we're going to fail. Even when we don't want to, we're going to accidentally slip up because we're human. We get tired, and when we get tired, we get cranky. Or when we're overwhelmed and we're overworked and we're overstressed and we have too many responsibilities, and we're just bound sooner or later to fail to meet someone's expectations. And so if you can just, understand and operate from the perspective that people are doing the best they can, but they may fail you, not intentionally. And it's not to be a pessimistic thinker, but it should be realistic. And that Jesus, God, is the only one that's infallible, that will never, never let you down. And so you've got to just change your mindset and shift it to think that way. You have to trust God and not people, because He is the only one that won't fail. And it's so important. We've been talking about your mind and your mindset, even throughout the Seek, but it's so important because there are a few things that you can change. We can't change COVID. We can't change what's going to happen if we get locked down again. We can't change the fact that, some of our kids have to do distance learning. Some of us have to work from home. Some of us has to go out to work, and we wish we could work from home. We can't change any of those things. You can't change the way people respond to you. You can't change the way people behave, the way they act, the way they are, the way they think. The things that you can control are the way you think. You can control your behaviors, the way you respond. Those are the only things that are literally under your control. Totally. I mean, your health is kind of under your control. You can eat in a way that promotes good health, but ultimately, your body is subject to your genetics and to the environment and all the toxins we may breathe in, the toxins in some of our foods. And so you can kind of control your health, but ultimately, not fully. You can kind of control the way you exercise and all of that, but only to a certain degree. So the only things that you can fully control is your perceptions, your attitudes, and how you respond, the things that you say and you do. And if you focus on those things, let me tell you, you will start to live better because you will begin to let everything else go. You won't experience road rage. Because number one, I drive, I expect people to do the wrong thing. I expect them to cut me off because they're in a hurry, or I'm driving too slow, or they got somewhere to be. And, so you just shrug it off. You have to expect people not to fully understand you. When at work, they talking about, this Halloween party, and I'm like, I don't celebrate Halloween. No, thank you. And they're like, oh, I don't expect them to understand. And they don't have to understand. They don't have to understand my wife's choices. And they don't even have to respect them. And that's okay. But it's not going to stop me from making my choices and standing up for what I believe in and my beliefs, because they're sure going to stand up for what they believe in. And so I would say that if you just really begin to work on your mindset and work on the way that you see things and begin to see every single person as a child of God. I'm sorry, I hear my phone, and because I'm on call for work, I just need to make sure it's not my boss calling. Good. So, and, part of this, so, fast forward now, I told you a little bit about the COVID mission. So right now we're on alert and working nights because of the potential for riots and, civil unrest, and because of the election, but also in Providence, we had this threat called Purge Providence. And so the organizer, thank God, was arrested. And so it kind of quelled that. So that didn't really materialize to be anything significant. And so, I praise God for that. But, we are going in tonight and we'll be working through the night. And, we pray that it'll be another quiet night tonight. And then as we, lead into the main voting day, we're going to be on alert for, that as well. So, that's been our mission, from yesterday until, next weekend. So, it's just a lot going on, in the spiritual world. And, I am always greatly aware that it's not just, the physical, what we see, but it's about the spiritual wickedness in high places that we're fighting against, not necessarily a physical man, a person, but the spirits using man, because spirits need a body. They need a body to do their work through. And so they take advantage of people who have opened themselves up to the dark arts, and they will use them. And so we just pray against that. And we pray that the strongholds be torn down. And so I'm just thankful because this, seek and this, watch came, at the perfect time. And of course, God knows, when things need to happen. And so, I'm just thankful that Jillian, is obedient, to the voice of God. And, one of my testimonies is, I knew that, I have two masters. I was a teacher for about 18 years, and I, was all done with school. according to me. I was like, I've had enough, 2 masters, and I have to do military education. I'm all set. I don't want to do any more schooling. And I knew that God was saying, you need to do a doctorate. I didn't want to do a doctorate. I was like, I don't want to do that work. I'm grown. I just want to relax and enjoy the fruits of my labor. I don't want any responsibility. And so last year, 2 years ago, I was working on a military resilience postgrad certificate. And as I'm working on it, I'm looking at the programs that this, university has, and there's a doctorate in community counseling. And literally, I felt an awakening in my soul. And it was like, this is the program. This is what you're supposed to do. And so I kind of read about it and looked into it, and, but I didn't really want to do it because I was like, oh, that sounds good, but that's a lot of work and I'm not up for that. And so I just kind of dismissed it and finished my military, education I was doing, and, it was good. And then during the Sikh, one evening, Miss Jillian was talking and ministering, and she specifically mentioned school and higher education and she was going on. And I knew that God was speaking to me. And I was like, and I texted Leah and I was like, oh Lord, I'm like, I got to apply for this program. And I had done the application before, but I just hadn't submitted it. Why? Because I didn't want to do the program. And I was just being disobedient. And I don't know, I thought God was going to change his mind. And God was like, okay, I'm just going to wait for you. I'm just going to wait. And I'm just going to keep sending the message. So when Minister Jillian spoke that night, I said, you know what, Lord, I'm sending in my application. And so, I sent in my application, and I was like, well, I'm like, doesn't mean I'm going to get in, because, it's a doctorate program, it's competitive, and that's a high level of work. And, it takes a whole lot. And I got in. So I was like, okay, Lord, I'm like, it was your will. I get it. And so I started in January, and I am just like, Lord, I'm interested and I'm excited to see how you're going to get me through this, seeing that I have a full-time job, a 5-year-old at home, and, just a huge responsibility at work. And so, but the former me would have said, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I know God's going to do it. And I'm just looking forward to seeing how he's going to do it, because it'll be a testimony for me to share with someone about how God can make a way when you have no idea how this is going to go down and how it's going to come to fruition. And so I have military education benefits. However, they don't pay for a doctorate. They only pay for the master's. So I was like, wow, Lord. So what seemed like, oh, I'll just use my military education benefits to pay for it is like, no, it will be out of pocket. So I'm like, Lord, I know you're going to make a way, because you and I know what's in that bank account and it's not that graduate tuition. So I praise God for that. And I trust him, because he knows what he's doing. And if you stay in his will and you stay on the path he set for you, he's going to open the doors that need to be open, because he's already opened the door for the first semester's tuition. And I was like, God, I knew you was going to do it. I was like, so I'm just looking forward to how I'm going to do all these 10-page research papers in 8 weeks, because they're 8-week sessions, they're intensive sessions. But I'm just thankful because I'm excited, about the opportunity. And it's an opportunity that God is giving me to fulfill the purpose that he has created me for. And so I say, thank you, God. Thank you for another chance, to be obedient. Thank you for not cutting me down when I was wasting time, fooling around, and not doing what you told me to do. But I'm all in now. And so I would say to you, be all in. Leave it all here on the earth. Do not go to your grave with all these talents and skills and creativity inside of you. When you take your last breath, let it be said that you left everything here on this earth. Everything. Every talent, every gift, every ounce of creativity, that you planted it right here on the earth so that it can bear fruit long after you've been gone. So I am looking forward to, this program and to everything that I'm going to learn. And I'm just very, interested to see God do his marvelous works, I mean, because I know that he has, amazing things in store for me. And when I say things, I don't literally mean things in terms of possessions. I mean the ministry that God has called me to. I mean the touching of lives. I mean helping people become free, helping people find their wholeness in God, helping people find their deliverance. Because I know that God is a deliverer. I know he's a healer, and I know that he has made me whole, and he has loosed the shackles that bound me for so many years. Turned my life around. I mean, my friends that I had used to be with were like, we don't even know who you are. And I was like, I am a child of the Most High God. That's how much he changed my life. And they were stunned, shocked, because they knew who I was. They knew who I had been. They knew the life that I had been living. And I tell you, when God delivers you, when God makes you whole, when God changes you, everyone will know. They will know you are different. They might think you went off on the deep end. They may not want to acknowledge it was God, but I'll tell them in a quick second, oh, it was God. I have all my faculties. I know exactly what is going on here, and it was God. And so I think they thought, oh, she's going through a phase. But no, it's not a phase. This is my life, and I'm going to live it to the fullest for Christ. Just like when I was out in the world, I was living it to the full. Turn up. I'm turned up for Jesus. I am turned up for God. Jillian was like, you are amped. I was like, I am amped. And I was like, but not just about this mission and what's going on. I was like, this 40 watch fort has got me amped. I was like, the prayers, the ministry, the teaching, the testimonies, the praise and worship. I was like, it has fed my soul. And so I was like, I am amped and I can't come down. I was like, everywhere I am, I'm trying to tune in. It's like I'm trying to get a fix, just tuning in, like getting on the watch, like who's on, who's praying, what song's playing, just adding to my own worship list. And so I thank God. And so I'm truly I know this isn't going to be over. It's not the end. So come tomorrow night, I know it's not the end, because I know that God has called us for such a time like this. He has raised us up. He has brought us together from all the different places and churches that we are from for this time, for this purpose. And we don't even know the greater purpose. We just have this one little glimpse of right now, but God knows the bigger picture. And a month from now, 2, 3, 4, 6 months from now, we're going to look back and be like, oh my, look at God. Look at the amazing thing that he has done for us. Look at how we've touched lives. I mean, we're going to be touching lives worldwide. And so I would say, open your mind, open your thinking, because this is bigger than we even imagine. Because God always does things that is above anything that we could ever think or imagine. Always, always, always. I mean, and just a physical carnal example. When I moved to Providence in 2000 from Boston, I was able to buy a 3-bedroom ranch house, and, when I was a kid, I grew up, in the inner city, in an apartment. We didn't have a car. We took public transportation everywhere. And my mom had a stroke when I was 10. And so she was disabled, on public assistance. And, we were poor, but we had everything we needed. I never lacked for anything. I always had church clothes, school clothes, coats, snowsuits, whatever. So I never lacked for anything because God provided. Because the first thing my mother did when she got that check, she was like, write out my tithes and offering. Till the day she took her last breath, she would have me write out her tithes and offering first, every first of the month. And so I am thankful for a mother that set the example for me of what you should do and how you should live. And so I always wanted to own my own home and have a car. And so when I moved to Providence, I bought this house, and my son was 3, and I was just thankful to God. Brand new house too. Nobody had lived in it. And so, I worked, I was teaching, and, we had a great life. Lived there for 16 years. So my daughter, she's actually my great niece, but biologically, adopted her with my ex. And so thought about schools, and I thought I sent my son to private school. And so I was like, I'm like, do I send Anna to private school, or what do I do? The schools in Providence aren't that great, And so, I said, God, what do I do? And so it's like, you know what? I'm going to move to a better community with a better school system, and buy a house there. Now, I was thinking I'm going to buy a modest house because, that's what I can afford. And if someone would have showed me the house that I'm in now and said, God said that this is the house that you're going to move into, this is the house you're going to buy, I would have started laughing. I would have did like Sarah. I would have laughed like, you don't know how much money I make. I can't afford that house. I know already. You don't got to show me how much it costs. I know I can't afford it. And I would have laughed like Sarah because I was small thinking. And I forgot of how great God was and how it doesn't matter what we're in because God knows exactly what he's going to do. And so I started looking for houses and, the particular communities I had sought out. And I had put an offer in on a house, and it was nice. It was a step above what I was owning, but it was still modest. And, they accepted the offer. So I was excited. And, we started doing the inspections. And when the inspections came back and there was a foundational issue. And so the woman, she didn't want to fix it. And I said, okay, well, if you decrease the price by X, then I'll fix it. And she didn't want to decrease the price. So I had to, pull out of the deal, cancel it. So I got discouraged and I told my realtor, I'm tired. I'm busy at work. I don't have time to look anymore. So I don't need to move right now. It's not an urgent issue. So I'm just going to take a break. So my realtor, she said, okay. And so in my mind, I had taken a break and I was like, I'm just going to leave it. I'm good. That's it. And then, a couple of weeks later, my realtor texted me and she said, I have a house I want you to look at. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll look at it. And so she gave me the address. So as I'm driving into the community, it's like, for those of you who watch the, what was the show? Wisteria Lane. It was like Wisteria Lane. And so I'm driving through and I'm like, okay, well, surely the house that I'm going to look at is probably the least expensive in the neighborhood and the least attractive in the neighborhood. Because I know that this is like, wow. And so I get to the house and it's beautiful. And I'm like, wow, this house is amazing. So we go in and it literally had everything I wanted on my wish list. It had the must-haves and it had the would like to have. And so I said to the realtor, I said, how much is this house? And so she told me, and I'm like, I can buy this house. That's in my budget. And so so I'm a planner. And I had this whole meticulous plan when I was searching for the house. And I said, well, how come this didn't come up in my search and plan? And so then I was curious. So I have so many questions and I'm always a thinker. So as I did my research to kind of figure this out, it turns out that the house had been above my price range, but it had decreased in price. And you're not even going to believe this, by $30,000, 30,000. And that brought it down into my budget. And I was like, look at God. And the price had come down because it hadn't sold. Now, I don't know why this house didn't sold because it was only 2 years old. And this neighborhood is amazing. And God said, because that's your house. That house was the house that I had for you. That's why it didn't sell, because it's your house. And I was like, whew, God, I thank you. Like, what could I say? I was buying that house down the road that I was going to have to do work on. And God was like, no, I got a barely lived in, almost new house. 2 years is new. And the person that lived here had barely been here. He was a businessman that traveled all the time. And that's why he was silent, because he was never here. And I was like, God, you are so good. So my family moves into a house that we don't have to do a thing to, not one thing, on a half an acre of land. Only God. And so I would have never believed that I would be living in a house like this, not in my wildest dreams. I was content with that little house that I had. And there was nothing wrong with it. And it's nothing wrong with having a little house. But God was like, I'll show you what I can do. Trust me. Trust me. Let me work. Follow my lead. Follow my instructions. And so I go back to seek God, ask God, do the check with God. We check with people about a lot of things, but we need to be checking with God about everything, because he won't lead you astray. He won't lead you down the wrong path. He won't do it. He won't do it. And so I tell you the truth. God has no respect of person. And I remember telling Minister Jillian, and Minister Jillian can attest to this. A couple years ago, I told her before she had her house, before she was looking for, I said, sis, I'm like, you can have a house like this. I'm like, if God gave me a house like this, he can do it for you too. He don't love me more than you. He is not a respecter of person. And man, when she got her house, I'm like, whoop, whoop, whoop. I told you, God can do it. So if he can do it for me, if he can do it for Minister Jillian, he can do it for you, whatever it is. If he can deliver me, he can deliver you. You are not too far gone in any situation. In any situation. In any situation. God can do exceedingly abundantly above all that we can ever ask, think, or imagine. He can. He can, and he will. He will if you let him. If you say yes. You say yes, and you follow that yes with your actions that say yes, God will do it. He will do it. He will do it. And so I just want to encourage you to stand firm in God's word. Be strong and be of good courage. In the Old Testament, so many times, the Israelites were told to be strong and to be of good courage, because courage is acting in the face of fear. It's acting when you're afraid. It's acting when it feels dangerous and it feels uncertain and it feels uncomfortable. Act anyway. Do it anyway. That's being of good courage, because you're moving forward in the discomfort. You're moving forward in the face of, your fears. You're not letting your fears drive you. You're letting your faith propel you forward, because your faith is what's going to propel you towards your destiny. Your faith. And that is believing that you will see it manifest while you are alive. David said, I would have fainted if I hadn't believed to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And I've seen so much of his goodness. And I'm believing him that he's going to save my son, that my son will complete the mission and purpose he was birthed here on this earth to do. My 5-year-old, she will walk in the holiness and the beauty of holiness. And listen, even now, God has his hand on her. And I tell you what, I thank God. And she prays with me and she prays for her friends. And boy, that kid has a sensitive spirit and heart, and she amazes me. And God teaches me through her. And so I say, thank you, God. May I be the mother that you have destined me to be for her, that I may teach her your ways, that she will grow up to be the mighty woman of God that you have desired her to be, to fulfill the purpose that you have for her life. And at the end of the day, I think to myself, God, who am I that you counted me worthy of another chance, worthy to minister to your people, worthy to touch lives, But God, I'm thankful. I'm thankful and I'm humbled. I'm thankful and I'm humbled. And all glory goes to God, because without him, I am nothing.
Okay.
Without
It's
him,
me. I'm
I
on
have
mute.
no intelligence. So
Yeah,
I thank
but
God.
I don't what.
So I hope that you have been blessed by what I've said. I pray that God will bless you. I pray that he will meet your every need. I pray that you will be in the center of his will and that you will be covered. Keep me in your prayers.